Oh, yeah, don't mind the redecorating. We're kind of doing some renovations here. But in any event, before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and point something out to you guys because the media, and especially here at the Closing Tag Network, love to speculate and throw ideas out and stuff like that. I am starting a series of blogs on the Sports Central side of theclosingtag.com where we are going to be looking at every NBA team, obviously minus the two that are in the finals right now, Dallas and Minnesota, or Dallas and Boston, I should say. Yeah, minus those two, we will be going through every NBA team from here until the draft to basically kind of go over what I personally think each team should be doing from this point forward. Go ahead and keep an eye out for that on sports.theclosingtag.com. I'll include a link in the description as always. And thank you. And now, on to your regularly scheduled programming. Following is a Galactic Digital Studios production. This is Sports Central, part of the Closing Tag Network. The NBA Finals are officially set, and I've got breakdowns and everything that you're going to need going forward, as well as some news regarding our favorite megastar? Can we call him a megastar anymore? I don't know. Anyway, the media likes to treat him as one. As well as potential coaching news. This is Sports Central, part of the Closing Tag Network. So, in case you are not aware, we have now officially reached the NBA Finals. What was once a field of 30, back in October, 29 if you want to be really realistic and exclude Detroit, all the way down to 2. On the Western Conference side, you have the Dallas Mavericks, who just barely defeated the Minnesota Timberwolves in 4-1. On the Eastern Conference side, you have the Boston Celtics, who swept the Indiana Pacers 4-0. Now, let's just shelve the whole Kyrie Irving revenge tour storyline that the media has been running with pretty much nonstop for the last 48 hours. Yeah, let's just table that whole thing for now. We're going to look primarily at each strength and weakness for each team, and then I'll give you my thoughts on who I think is going to end up winning the series. Obviously, Boston is looking really good right now. They just barely, like I said, swept the Indiana 4-0. This was coming off their 4-1 win over Cleveland in the previous round and 4-1 win over Miami the round before that. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say controversy. There's been a lot of talk about, oh, Boston had an easy road to the finals. They basically, put a voodoo hex on all these players and whatnot. There was one guy, one content creator that made a really funny skit about Drew Holiday, pulling out his notebook of voodoo hexes that he learned in New Orleans. I'm using air quotes on that. And, that's how they managed to get by Jimmy Butler and Donovan Mitchell and Tyrese Halliburton. And then, of course, at the end of the skit, Luka is complaining about his ankle hurting. Kind of silly stuff like that. Stuff that I like to laugh at, but I really don't take very seriously. Yes, Boston's road has been mildly easy, but keep in mind, Boston entered the playoffs with the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference and the best record in the league. So how much of that really is about not really getting other teams' best shot versus just being really that good? Kind of keep that in mind. For Dallas, it's been more of a, treacherous road. They managed to get by the Clippers 4-3 in the first round. And then they ended up winning 4-1 in each of the next 2 rounds. First against Oklahoma City and then against Minnesota. I will say this, and I've said this a couple of times already. I was wrong about Kyrie. I was one of those people that thought Kyrie Irving was not going to be a good fit on Dallas. I thought that maybe he was basically biding his time until his free agency came up, and he basically bolts for the Lakers on a veteran minimum to reunite with his good buddy LeBron James. And we'll get to LeBron in a minute. But I was wrong. Not only has Kyrie actually put in effort, he's actually become one of the top leaders on that Dallas Mavericks team and a good mentor, I've noticed, for Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic not only is the scoring champion for this season for the NBA, he's probably become the second best player in the league, if we're being honest. And the way that he handled the defense for Minnesota, and by the way, Minnesota will be back. I have no doubts about that in my mind. Yes, they've got some ownership issues. Yes, they've got, some situations going on. And yes, they're going to be heavy into the luxury tax, but they'll be back. Back to Dallas. And back to Luka. Luka handled that Minnesota defense very well, and I have to commend him and the coaching staff in Dallas, Jason Kidd. They've all been doing a fantastic job of just preparing for the playoffs and whatnot. And you kind of had to expect that from Jason Kidd. He's been here before as a player, so that's something that you should probably keep an eye on as well. Joe Mazzulla obviously has been handling the Boston Celtics very well. I think a lot of us knew the moment that Boston made the trade for Jrue Holiday that they were going to be a force in the Eastern Conference. I basically called it when it happened. It was going to be Boston versus Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals. May the best team win. Obviously, Milwaukee didn't even make it out of the first round. But that's neither here nor there. Boston looks to me like the most complete team out of the two. Yes, Dallas has a good starting 5, but their bench is, suspect at best. Boston's starting 5 and at least 6 through 8 has been stellar. Has been, knocking it out of the park over the last 3 rounds of the playoffs. I don't know if Dallas has enough to really handle Boston. Offensively, obviously, Luka is going to be Luka. Kyrie is going to be Kyrie, and they're going to bring everything they've got. But defensively, I don't know if they have enough to stop Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown has been phenomenal in these playoffs. And I would suspect that Boston is going to want to put Drew Holiday on Luka Doncic early and often. It's like one of those good defensive matchups that you are kind of kicking yourself for not thinking of sooner. For all those reasons, and I haven't even gotten to Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis, to me, is the wild card. If Kristaps Porzingis is hurt for the first 2 or 3 games, I'm willing to say Boston takes this in 7. If he's healthy and he's playing right and he's playing well, Boston's taking this series in 5. I just don't think Dallas has what it takes at this point. Now, switching gears to, I mentioned LeBron. Yes, yeah. Well, the LeBron saga continues. And this time it involves, once again, his son, Bronny James. Bronny James has been actually surprisingly good during the NBA Combine and, really impressing a few teams. He's gotten to the point where he has received workout requests from at least 10 different teams in the league. Only problem is that he has declined most of those requests and will only work out for 2 teams. You already know the Lakers are one. So, yeah. The surprising one is Phoenix. The Phoenix Suns. Now, Phoenix is going to be an interesting case study because we already know LeBron's preference is that he wants to play with his son, Bronny. However, LeBron has also, come out and said, listen, it would be nice if I got to play with my son, but that's not really, my driving force. That's not my focal point, which I call bullshit. But let's play out a scenario here. Because right now, we already know LeBron is opting out of his player option. We know that he is going to be declaring himself as an unrestricted free agent in July. And he is going to command a lot of attention and a lot of money. Let's play out a hypothetical. Let's say Bronny works out for both Phoenix and LA. He convinces LA to at least take a second look at him and just completely wows Phoenix. Like he, just completely floors them with how well he plays. And Phoenix ends up taking him, I can't remember what all draft picks they have. I'd have to take a look, but what if Phoenix ends up getting him? Phoenix right now is so far over the luxury cap threshold that in order to get LeBron James, they would have to basically sign him to a veteran's minimum, $1 million contract. They would not be able to sign and trade anybody for him. They can't sign and trade, Bradley Beal or Devin Booker or Kevin Durant or anybody else. They would have to get LeBron on the veteran's minimum. You know as well as I do, LeBron James is not going to play for only $1 million. His number one goal after he's done playing is to own his own NBA franchise. He wants to be an NBA owner badly. He is not going to be able to become an owner if you're only giving him $1 million a year. Just doesn't work that way. And believe me, I've got thoughts about owners and whatnot that I'll probably save for another time. I am noticing a lot of discontent with sports owners, not just in the NBA, but across the board. And it kind of ties into people having resentment towards people that are rich and powerful. Like I said, I'll have thoughts on that. But yeah. LeBron wants to be an NBA owner. I don't see him signing for $1 million a year for 2 years for the Phoenix Suns. I just don't see it. I do not see it. So it boils right back down to what's more important for LeBron. Is winning important? Because if winning is important and getting ring number 5 is important, obviously he's going to be signing with someone that is going to be able to give that to him. To give him an opportunity to, be able to go after ring number 5. So that leaves Philadelphia. Philadelphia 76ers have the cap room. They have the pieces already in place. And they have the coaching staff. They have what it takes to get LeBron ring number 5. And LeBron would be motivated enough to go sign with Philadelphia, mentor Tyrese Maxey, team up with Joel Embiid, and really go after the championship at that point. Plus, the Eastern Conference is just... it's kind of a mess. Yeah. Just a little bit. And it would give, Philadelphia a chance to really, put something together that would contend with Boston for the Eastern Conference Championship at the very least. But that would leave Bronny out in the cold, either in LA or Phoenix. And, LeBron would only be able to play against him twice a year. That is, of course, assuming it comes down to LA or Phoenix on who ends up drafting Bronny. Now, is playing with his son more important? Because if that's the case, whoever drafts Bronny is probably going to end up getting LeBron in that scenario. I don't know if that's going to be accurate. I don't know if that's going to be the case. So that leaves option number 3. Go for the money. He's able to sign for more money per year with the Lakers than really anywhere else. And if that's most important to him, then I definitely see him signing with the Lakers. Now, that of course means that he's going to end up... I know he's already said that he does not want to be, clued in on the coaching search for the Lakers. Again, I call bullshit. But LeBron is probably going to wind up back in LA. He's going to probably wind up with the Lakers. And I could easily see him orchestrating some sort of sign and trade with the Clippers to bring Paul George to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. Do I want to see it happen? Not really. Do I think it will happen? Outside chance. I still think Paul George is going to be focusing on either Philadelphia or Indiana. I just don't see him. I don't see the Clippers cooperating, is probably a good way of putting it. But all of that said, I think LeBron is probably going to stay in LA. I think he's going to continue to insist that the Lakers look at Bronny. And I mean, it really depends on where Bronny goes. I still don't see him as a first round pick. I just don't. Not even in this week of a draft class. Most mock drafts are still projecting him somewhere in the 45 to 55 range. So, and this is after the combine. So, where does he wind up? Where does Bronny wind up? I think that's going to tell us what we want to know as far as what LeBron's intentions are going to be. But switching, once again, there's an interesting development going on over in New York. Now, I've mentioned this man in the previous Sports Central podcast, Johnnie Bryant. Johnnie Bryant was the player development expert. He was the player development guru for Quinn Snyder and the Utah Jazz when he was here. He then moved on to become the associate head coach and the player development expert / guru for Tom Thibodeau and the New York Knicks. I think that he was probably the single biggest reason why the Knicks were able to develop Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle into the superstars that they are. And apparently, I'm not the only one that's taken notice, because there are rumors going around that the Brooklyn Nets are interested in bringing Johnnie Bryant on as the head coach. Johnnie Bryant, I will say this, he is going to be making out like a bandit financially, regardless of what happens. Regardless of if he stays with the Knicks, regardless of if he goes somewhere else to be a player development coach, regardless of if he ends up going to become a head coach somewhere, he is going to be making bank. And I think there's another ulterior reason why the Nets are going after Johnnie Bryant. I'll sum that ulterior motive in two simple words. Donovan Mitchell. The Nets know that Donovan Mitchell badly wants to come home, wants to go to New York. The Brooklyn Nets know that Johnnie Bryant and Donovan Mitchell are tight. They are good friends. They formed a really good friendship and relationship when they were both here in Utah. The Brooklyn Nets also know that Johnnie Bryant is a player development magician. And if anybody can get this current group of Brooklyn Nets players to perform and be all that they can be, it's Johnnie Bryant. Now, granted, they would have to give him, complete autonomy and control as to who he hires as, his assistants. But I'd imagine that they're okay with that. Now, the one key caveat is going to be, what do they give the Cleveland Cavaliers in return? I'm going to pull up something real quick. Hold on one second. Just going to pull up something very quickly. I was doing this the other day, and I've completely forgotten. Let's see here. just going to pull up the Brooklyn Nets. Yeah, here we go. So the Brooklyn Nets, if everything, stays the way it is, are right at the cap. Now, there is one player that could potentially go to Cleveland in some sort of trade between the two teams. And I've got thoughts on this particular player that I'm going to save for another podcast. But the player's name is Ben Simmons. Now, what I could envision seeing happening is Donovan Mitchell and Dean Wade, not to be confused with Dwayne Wade. Settle your horses. Those two players going to Brooklyn for Ben Simmons. And then Ben Simmons' expiring contract ends up getting eaten by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they basically say, okay, we're just going to have to accept that this is, a loss for now. Now, the one other thing that could potentially happen is a third team gets in, because right now Brooklyn doesn't really have hardly any draft pick control whatsoever. But if they got, say, the Knicks or someone else, to get in on the action, that might actually benefit, everybody involved. One other thing that I could see happening is maybe a trade involving Ben Simmons going to the Knicks then sending Julius Randle and a couple of future first rounders to Cleveland, and then Donovan Mitchell going to Brooklyn. But at the same time, I don't know if I see that happening, because how does that benefit New York? A lot of questions and a lot of moving pieces. This is kind of one of those really interesting scenarios where you already know a certain player is probably not going to be long for the world. They're probably not going to be around much longer, at least in that capacity. And Donovan Mitchell's player option for 2025-2026 is only $37 million. I know, only, but it's only $37 million. If he were to opt out and then sign somewhere or whatnot, he would be able to make at least $45 million a year. At least. So it's not outside the realm of possibility for Donovan Mitchell to say, okay, I'm not opting for my final year on my contract. I'm going to go ahead and test free agency in 2025. At that point, Cleveland would have to trade him if they're going to get anything of any kind of value for him. Now, the one other thing is that they could keep him for 2024-2025. And then when he makes his intentions known that he wants to go sign with Brooklyn or New York or whoever, and the team that he's wanting to go to is still cap strapped, or worse, is in the luxury threshold, it could present an opportunity for Cleveland to do a sign and trade. And then they would get, players and draft picks in return that way. There's a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different scenarios involving not just Donovan Mitchell, but just about anybody that's going to be hitting the free agency market. This new CBA that was signed, I believe last summer, is going to present a lot of problems and also a lot of opportunity for teams and players alike. And in all likelihood, this is another reason why the super team era in the NBA is going to be going away, with Phoenix being the last of a dying breed, basically. So that's all my thoughts on that. And I want to thank everybody that is listening, watching, downloading, donating, doing everything they can to help chug this train along. Your efforts are not going unnoticed, so thank you. For those that are listening to this on Spotify, leave a review. Reviews are awesome, and they're open. If you're watching this on Facebook, like, share, comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. That way, you will be notified every time a new video drops. Thank you again for listening and for watching and doing all the things. And until next time, remember to include your closing tags. Thank you. This has been a Galactic Digital Studios production.